Hey, what is up, everybody? Platform Disciple here. And as many of you have probably gathered at this point, it has been a long time since I've made any videos. And ultimately, the reason for that is that I've stepped away from Infinity Wars. And some of you have probably noticed that as well. I haven't been playing at all in months now. And I think the reason will come as no surprise. Infinity Wars has not been producing really any valuable content, and that it's hard to remain interested in a game, even one that's so rich like Infinity Wars is, when there are other games that actively support their player base by creating content and communicating with them. And ultimately, I guess what I'm saying is that Infinity Wars is not catering to the player base anymore. Some people say that the game is dead. I don't think the game is dead if you enjoy playing it and you're still playing it. But it's certainly not a game that I expect most players to really put very much time into, when it's quite clear that the developers are not putting much time into it. It's hard for somebody to be very passionate about something and care about it a lot when the person responsible for it and creating it doesn't display that same level of passion. But anyways, so why am I making a video now after so long? The answer is that I do really like card games, and I like Infinity Wars, and I like talking about card games, and I want to share that passion with other people. I think that there are probably a lot of you that care a lot about Infinity Wars, but also about a lot of other card games or just games in general. And I'm going to start a series to kind of explore that passion and look at a massive variety of different card games that you can play online, and basically give an overview of them. And the idea here is to present the videos in two parts. The first part being my best argument as to why you should play this game. What's good about this game? What makes it special? What makes it fun? And then the later half of the video is going to be why you shouldn't play the game. What is bad about the game? Why should you not spend your time on it, or time or money, depending. And I'm not going to come to a conclusion. I'm going to allow the audience to come to their own conclusion, because my opinions may differ from other people's. But basically, the idea is let the video convince you. If you're drawn in by me talking about what's good about the game, give it a shot. Spend your time on it. And if you're hearing a bunch of red flags from the part of the video where I talk about what's bad, then leave it and watch another video where I review another card game. And that's the general gist of it. The rest of this video is going to be one of these kinds of videos, the do or don't for the card game, the what's good and bad about it for Infinity Wars, because that's a very fitting place to start, because obviously I have spent so much time on that game, the channel's about that game, and everyone watching this video is familiar with it. So that being said, let's just hop into it. Just to begin, in the case that somehow somebody wandered in here not knowing what Infinity Wars is, let's just give a brief summary of what the game is like. It's a free-to-play online trading card game that you can find on Steam, and it has a loose sci-fi fantasy theme. So you're going to see some very sci-fi stuff, some very high fantasy stuff, and a lot of blends in between. The game features a variety of factions that are all very unique from each other and can be used either independently or in combination. And these factions range from weird cyber zombies to scientists with their robots, cultist witches, and so on. Now that you know the general theme of the game, let's dive right into what makes it unique and worth your time. What makes it special? So let's begin by talking about simultaneous turns. Infinity Wars does something interesting, where rather than having players take turns one after the other, watching each other perform actions and then taking your own actions, players perform their actions in secret during a prep phase. When both players have finished their preparations, the actions resolve at the same time. This means that turns will frequently play out completely different than how at least one player expected. It's possible to predict your opponent's move and play around it in a way that completely negates the effect of whatever move they wanted to take. Another aspect of Infinity Wars that is pretty special is that for a card game, it has an exceptionally low amount of randomness. And of course, in any real card game that, as far as I know of, there is some degree of randomness in the form of drawing cards. Sometimes you flip a card up and it's just not what you were looking for. And other times you flip a card up and it's exactly what you were looking for. Of course, Infinity Wars does have this to some degree, but the amount of randomness actually written into cards is fairly low. In addition, what's more special is that there are a few game mechanics that naturally reduce the kind of frustrating and unfortunate experience of getting just completely bum hands or bad draws. So in some card games, the game can frequently feel like it's decided very early on just because your opening hand or early draws are not exactly what you were looking for. Infinity Wars has two things that really affect that. One is that there are commanders, which is a set of 3 cards that you have chosen from your deck that are always available at the beginning of the game and can be played for their cost, or you can use their effects from the command zone. This allows players, when they're building their deck, to choose cards that will naturally give you some early plays to smooth out your curve. In the case that you don't draw something to play on curve, you can play or use one of your commanders instead. Likewise, the trade post is a set of options available to players at any stage of the game where they can spend their extra resources to basically manipulate how they want to play the game. In the case that you desperately need some specific cards or really don't have any way to take advantage of a card in your hand, you can pay 3 resources any number of times to shuffle a card from your hand back into your deck and draw a new card. You can also spend 5 resources in the case that you simply have nothing to do with your resources, you're just out of gas, to refill your hand 1 card at a time. And for some slower decks that want to do some wacky combos or play some really high cost cards, you can spend 9 resources to permanently increase your number of resources by 1. The game mechanics of having commanders in the trade post reduces the amount of unfun variance in the game and gives players a lot of control over the outcome at the stage of deck building as well as throughout the entire game. The reduction in variance combined with the very high skill cap in Infinity Wars allows for better players to truly excel, not only just winning consistently, but absolutely destroying worse players in a way that is undeniably skill-based as opposed to based on luck. A true veteran in Infinity Wars wins games regardless of the quality of the deck if they are pitted against a player who's simply less skilled. An example of this is in the Rift Run game mode, a mode where you construct a deck by picking one of 4 random cards repeatedly until you have an entire deck. In this mode, you play until you lose 3 times and receive rewards based on the number of wins you got along the way. I've seen veteran players net literally over 100 wins in a single run. And this isn't just because their deck is better. It's not because their luck is better. These people are able to do this semi-consistently. I have seen some players get 50+ wins multiple times in a row. In a card game with a lower skill ceiling and higher variance, this simply isn't possible because eventually you're going to run into a deadbeat draw or somebody whose deck is better and they win regardless of how well they play. In Infinity Wars, the quality of your deck and quality of cards you draw throughout the game is much less of a factor than the skill factor when compared to other card games. One major concern of newer players when starting any collectible card game is, will I be able to compete effectively with just the starting cards? How far behind am I going to be from the rest of the player base? In Infinity Wars, you're given a lot of free cards, and the power level of lower rarity cards is very high. A lot of the most competitive decks run a great number of commons and uncommons. In addition, there are a lot of powerful decks that you can purchase from the store for the in-game currency that you receive for just playing. These aren't low-tier starter decks either. These are pretty powerful decks that you could enter a ranked game with and really hold your own. With only a few tweaks, you could really upgrade these into Tier 1 or Tier 2 decks. Another aspect of collectible card games, of course, is the collecting portion. Is it fun to get new cards? What am I looking forward to when I open a booster pack? Is it going to be interesting, or does it not really matter after a certain point? Infinity Wars has multiple premium types, and what this does is it really keeps players interested in pimping out their decks, essentially. There's alternate art cards, there are infinity bordered cards which you receive for performing extremely well in ranked or in Rift Run. There are golden cards that appear periodically, foil cards as well, and there's some crossover too. You can get golden foils, which is just crazy rare and super desirable. Not only that, when new sets come out in Infinity Wars, you can pre-order cards, and pre-ordering cards gives you the platinum border, which is exclusive to the pre-order phase. What's nice is that you don't have to pre-order cards with real money. You can pre-order with your in-game currency. This makes collecting cards in Infinity Wars really, really fun, just because you have a lot to get excited over when you're opening a booster pack. You could open a golden legendary card, you could open a golden foil common that is a staple in competitive decks. These are very desirable cards, and most of these cards are tradable. So if you don't really care about pimping out your deck, you can trade these cards to somebody who does and receive plenty of staples that you need to truly make your deck the highest quality. Now that I've finished telling you what's great about the game and why you should play it, let's talk about why you shouldn't play it and what's bad about the game. As many of you have expected, I have decided to begin with discussing the apparent abandonment of the game by the developers. Throughout the history of the game, the developers have barely communicated, and it's unclear on many occasions whether the game had any future. Sometimes you would hear nothing for an endless stretch, and then suddenly there is an update. These updates would sometimes be huge balance changes, but the development team wouldn't release any kind of information about why they did the update. So these updates would come unannounced with no real patch notes or explanation. You wouldn't hear anything from the balance team really at all. At the moment, there's no reason to expect any additional updates for the game. It's safe to say that the game has been completely abandoned. The developers' lack of support for the game is no secret, and the player base has had a large exodus over the years and is extremely small now, leaving only a handful of highly skilled, entrenched veterans and some oblivious new players who stumble in just looking to try something new. Not only does the lack of player base result in very long queue times frequently, but you may get matched against the same player multiple times in a row, resulting in veterans who are very good at the game completely crushing some new players who don't get a chance to learn or play against anyone else. As a matter of fact, even when the game was quote-unquote less dead, I remember me and my brother talking about retiring other people's Rift runs, where we would single-handedly, I would go in and play against the same person 3 times in a row and beat them 3 times in a row, resulting in their Rift run ending not having played any other matches against other players. And one of the last problems in the game is, although trading is an interesting and cool thing that many online card games don't have, not having any kind of crafting system is extremely detrimental to a game, especially one with a small player base. It's very hard to get staple cards because you have to get lucky enough to open them, or run into one of the few people online who's willing to trade their cards with you. Well, everyone, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. And I did also want to say a couple things before we go here. One is I'm going to jump straight into making this kind of video as a series on a whole variety of card games. You can expect me to make Gwent next, but I also would love if you guys would suggest card games for me to try out and give my take on them. I also wanted to say that this series is something that if a card game has a substantial update or change, I'm willing to revisit it in the case that my opinion would change. Notably, as you might be thinking right now, if Infinity Wars does something to make me think differently about it, I will go back and do a new video on Infinity Wars. I might even start playing the game more seriously again, if at all. Like, if the game released a new set, that'd be great. I would jump right back there, no problem at all. But I have two concerns. One is I genuinely don't think that there will be any real updates ever again. And the second is that even if there was an update, I think the developers are so poor at communicating that anything's going on that I might not know about the update until like well after it really mattered. So if anything happens, you guys let me know in the comments, like say, hey, there's new cards out or whatever. It's like, I'll take a look at it at least. And until next time, everybody, I hope you like this one. Give me any feedback that comes to mind in the comments. See you later.